sort of a running list of the criteria of your country property. So here we have some of the first points that we've run into so far. Away from the city, able to raise provisions, and then this, encompasses a lot of things, needs to be rural. And these are all direct statements from the quotes, okay? That's what's going up here. We're just adding them up so that at the end we can see the full criteria list. Rural, houses not crowded, okay? So they can't be close together. Free from the interference of enemies. That's a fascinating one that we can get into more about. He wants us to live where we can have elbow room. There's another one. His people are not to crowd into the cities. He wants them to take their families out of the cities, that they may better prepare for eternal life. In a little while, they will have to leave the cities. If we place ourselves under objectionable influences, can we expect God to work a miracle to undo the results of our wrong course? So if we stay in the city, do we expect God to put a magical bubble around us and perform a miracle that we won't receive the destruction that's coming on that city? No, indeed. Get out of the cities as soon as possible and purchase a little piece of land where you can have a garden, excuse me, where your children can watch the flowers growing and learn from them lessons of simplicity and purity. No, indeed. Get out of the cities as soon as possible where you can have a garden. Now, this little piece of land, people say, 1 or 2 acres, plenty. Is that what she meant by little piece? Well, as we continue down, we're going to find out what a little piece of land is. So we just added 2 more points to our criteria. We need to have elbow room and we need to have a garden. Now, some of these are going to feel like they overlap a little bit, and that's okay because it's going to give us more descriptors on how we can actually define some of these things. So some of them will be similar, but I'm adding them here anyways so that we get the most complete picture by the end of this. For this reason, I see the necessity of the people of God moving out of the cities into retired country places where they may cultivate the land and raise their own produce. Thus, they may bring their children up with simple, healthful habits. I see the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis. So now we have, it needs to be retired country places. So these need to be quiet. They need to be farther out. We need to have arable or cultivatable land. Now, that word cultivation is a very interesting word. Usually that's in connection to some sort of draft power, something that's mechanized to actually work the land. So whether it be horses or oxen, donkeys, doesn't really matter. That's what was used in that day. There was no such thing as rototillers. There was no such thing as tractors or quads, ATVs, anything like that. So they had to do it all with animal power. Raise produce. So our produce needs to be from us. And we need to get all things ready for the crisis. We need to get all things ready. So whatever you think you might need for this crisis, it has to be able to be produced and it has to be able to be secured and placed and stored on this piece of property. So it can't be so small that you can't fit it. It needs to have suitable area that you can actually do these things, whether it's wood, water, growing space, storage space. All of these things need to be on that piece. To parents who are living in the cities, the Lord is sending the warning cry, gather your children into your own houses, gather them away from those who are disregarding the commandments of God, who are teaching and practicing evil. Get out of the cities as fast as possible. How much more emphasis do we need? Get out as soon as possible. Get out as fast as possible. Make haste. This emphasis here is not slowing down, it's speeding up. And if you're believing that we're in the final movements and that the end is really close, we need to be pulling out all the stops and get out of the city as fast as possible. Why? Because at an hour you thinketh not, destruction is going to come on these cities. And we don't want to be part of the destruction. We need to be out of the area of destruction. So we need to be in the country, away from these things. Parents can secure small homes. Doesn't have to be a large mansion in the country with land. So the emphasis is on the land. That's the most important part here. For cultivation, where they can have orchards and where they can raise vegetables and small fruits to take the place of flesh meat. Well, there we get into the health message now. So this is a plant-based, self-sustainable farm, which is so corrupting to the lifeblood coursing through the veins. On such places, the children will not be surrounded with the corrupting influences of the city life. God will help his people to find such homes outside the cities. And I want to just add emphasis to this last line, because people always say, well, I don't know how. I can't. There's no way that I'll be able to do this. Well, God said he will help his people to find such homes outside of the cities. God will help his people find homes outside of the cities. Okay, so now we have some more criteria. Our list is building. This is great, because if anybody's wondering, what are the criteria? We're building the list right here, right now. Land, orchards, vegetables, and small fruits, which I would classify as things like berries. Now, I'm just going to read the blue for the sake of time. His people, the Lord desires his people to move into the country where they can settle on the land. Doesn't that sound like one of the settlers? They're coming into this wilderness and they're settling there and they're building their house and they're having the gardens and they're, all these things. They're developing the land. This is a very fascinating way of describing that. And raise their own fruit and vegetables. And where their children can be brought in direct contact with the works of God in nature. Take your families away from the cities is my message. If you have children, you have no time to lose. You have time to lose. Actually, you need to move now. If you have a family, everything in your power needs to be to get them away from the demoralizing, the evils of the city. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You need to get as far away as possible. That is the command from God, to take your families away from the cities. If you think that you're doing them a service by being in the city, you're not. If you're trying to be here for a certain reason, because they need the school, they need the activity, they need the whatever, their family, anything, you need to move and you need to be in a place where they can learn from God through nature and give them the things that they need in order to grow and be actually caring about God and not getting influenced by all the wickedness that comes with the city. And don't bring the city into the country. Don't give them Wi-Fi and a phone and an iPad and a laptop and everything else where they can access all the evils of the city. That's not the point. You get them outside and they start climbing trees and they build stuff and they run around in the bush and they do the things that kids are supposed to do outside. And that's the way that God designed it. That's the way that they were in Canaan. When they got to the promised land, everyone had a big property where their family was. We need to be getting out of the city. Now, here's the next points that we have just added. Able to settle / homestead. So that means it needs to be self-sufficient. It needs to be able to run self-sufficiently. And please, if you've never done that, don't make assumptions on the least common denominator type property of that this is possible on 1 or 2 acres and you can grow enough food on 100 square feet. I'm sorry, it's not possible. There's no way, absolutely no way that you're able to do that. Not even if you had all the GMOs and chemicals in the entire world, could you do that? So we need to be, unless you did like a skyscraper of vegetables or something like this. So we have to have all the context in order to make this possible. So it has to be something that you can settle on and that you can homestead. The next thing is direct contact to nature. So this shouldn't be something where there's no nature. There needs to be nature. You need to see the wild animals. You need to see the birds. You need to see the plants. You need to, be out where there's not people as a barrier between you and nature, where you can just go from your property into nature. Your property should be in nature anyways, but this is all part of the package, and we're building all these points. It will then be time to leave the large cities, preparatory to leaving the smaller ones for retired homes in secluded places among the mountains. And these are homes in the mountains. These aren't fleeing to caves in the mountains. Big difference. A lot of people miss this point. So when we look here, this is part of the criteria. The property we're looking for is that it's secluded and it's in the mountains. So when we're going to be fleeing to the mountains, you can't flee to the mountains if you're not close to the mountains. So you need to be in some sort of a distance where you can flee from your property to the mountains. And it needs to be in secluded places. If it's not secluded, it's not the right place. And as the council went on throughout the years from when it was first given out of the cities, is the message that God is now giving, to later, it was farther and farther as time went. Because the cities get bigger, the transportation gets faster, the impact of war gets larger. All of these things are factors on how close and where you need to position yourself in the country. So there was more and more counsel given. Now, a lot of this we can find in the Bible as well. So let's go to Genesis chapter 19. And if you have your Bibles, I would love for you to join in your Bibles. I have it on the screen for those who can't have their Bibles at the moment. But if you have them, say amen and please turn there. Genesis 19, verse 12 to 14. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. That was the command that God was giving. For we will destroy this place. And do you not think for 1 minute that if Lot was in that city, a magical miracle bubble would be put around him? Absolutely not. If he did not heed the counsel, he would have been destroyed with the rest of the sinners in that city. Because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get ye out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. Let's continue down just to the highlighted. And while he lingered, so he was hesitant. Then he said, Look not behind thee, neither stay. This is the angels now saying, Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And then, here's the problem. Lot was compromising and debating. I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. What if I move to the mountains and I starve? What if the garden fails? What if there's a bear? What if there's something that's going to kill me and I die in the country? Then I can't minister. I need to minister to the people. Behold, now this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. It's just a village. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. This was a compromise that Lot was trying to make to the angel, and it didn't go very well. He lost his family because of it. He hesitated, he debated with God, and that city was next destroyed. So here we see some more criteria from the Bible. It cannot be flat plains without mountains. And that seems redundant, but a lot of people will think that, well, mountains is not literal. And so, it just means wilderness. But here it's specifically saying, don't stay in the flat plains. Go to the mountains. The mountains is where God can protect you. Father, okay, we're switching gears a little bit. So just to wrap up on this, we have a huge list of criteria so far. So it's getting to a really nice size, and we're getting a lot of factors introduced away from the city, able to raise provisions. It needs to be rural. Houses not crowded, closely together, free from the interference of enemies. Let's break some of these down a little bit just so they're more understandable. So away from the city, that should be pretty plain, that it cannot be in the city. Now, your defining factor of what city is going to mean is maybe bias, depending on who you are and what your experience is with city. So we need to give more defining factors than just out of the city, because some people think the suburbs is out of the city. Some people think if they have a quarter-acre lot and they're not in a high rise, but they're in a nice house, that's not in the big, busy city. What is the definition of this? And we're going to be targeting what is a large city. We're going to give you the answer to that. We're going to give you the answer, how many miles do you need to be from the city? What's the distance? All this stuff. Now, another one of the criteria was able to raise provisions. So, able to raise provisions. Provisions are all sorts of things, whether that is your water, whether that is your food, your wood, whether that's building material, whether that is all sorts of things. We need to be able to produce this from our own piece of land. Now, that even includes, and a lot of people aren't thinking about this, how are you going to start seedlings if you don't have potting mix? You need to be able to make your own potting mix and compost and all of these things. So you have to have all of this in mind. And Noah would have had all of this in mind. When he got on the ark and he came to the world after it was destroyed, it looks like a mess. And he's taking the seeds and he's having to start growing food and he's having to do all these things after he gets out on this barren world. He had to know exactly what to do and have everything in place. So all of this has to be able to be done on your property. Now, it has to be rural. This is an important piece too. Not in a town. We're not talking town. We're talking rural. Houses not crowded. So and we're going to see some more quotes. Even if you have people partnering on a property, you don't want to be within shouting distance, and you don't want to be able to, throw a rock into the window of the next house. That's crowded closely together. You need to be free from the interference of enemies. For me, that can be a lot of things, even things like the big GMO farms. In the prairies, you have the wind and it just takes all those chemicals, it takes the pollen from all the GMO plants, and now all your plants are cross-pollinated with GMOs, and you have a mess. And that's not what we want. We want to be isolated to the point where we have a protective barrier from all these enemies and things that are going to be encroaching on our ability to actually sustain ourselves through this time of trouble, just like Noah did. He had to make the walls of that ark thick enough that when everything was bashing up against the sides of that ark, they didn't break through. So all these things had to be considered. Elbow room, you don't want to be crowding each other. You want to have good space. You need to have space for a garden. And that means you need decently flat land that has good access to sunlight. Yes, you can terrace. Yes, you can all of these things. It's a lot. I would not recommend getting a property where it's so steep that you can't have a flat garden. If you can terrace in large sections, okay. But if you're doing a bed and if you're terracing a single bed, that's pretty steep. That gets really hard in order to produce a lot of food without having extra labor. So you want to be considering all of those things, and you want to have good sun exposure. You don't want everything to be on the north-facing slope or something like this where you don't get sun. Especially if you're in a cooler area, which the mountains are usually cooler. You want that exposure. Even if it's not perfectly north, it doesn't have to be north-facing hard, but at least if you have good sun exposure, that's the key. Getting good sun exposure and arable land for producing. Retired country, this isn't busy country. Cultivatable, you need to have area that is able to be cultivated. And if you're using draft animals or some, because you're no buy, no sell, you have no fuel, you have no parts, you can't do an oil change, all of this stuff, then you want to be able to maybe turn the animals around or, something simple like that. Raising your produce, and you need to learn how to do all of these things. Noah took 120 years, and we don't want to take 10 minutes to learn some of these skills. We need to be willing to take the time to learn them. God's given us time. He's given us over 100 years to perfect these skills. And I'm telling you now, you still have time. You need to make haste, and you need to move instantly. But you have time if you move quickly. God will help you to understand a few months, which took someone like me or others years to learn the skills. We need to get all things ready for the crisis. Not thinking that one we can, get away with, or we're going to MacGyver something in the crisis. We need to have land. We need to have orchards, vegetables, small fruits. Be thinking of all these different things, but don't rush and do it all at once. And then it becomes a mess. You want to systematically go through. And we'll be looking in some of the later studies on what some of those systematic process look like and how to start each of those. Able to settle / homesteadable. So if you think, wow, if someone came upon this land and they were a settler and they were driving up with their wagon, is this look suitable? Would they say, this is a nice spot? Direct contact to nature. Is it peaceful? Do you hear the birds? Do you hear the nature singing? Secluded places among the mountains. Are you close enough to the mountains where if you had to flee, you can flee to them? Or are you days away if you needed to flee? Because that's too far. Not the flat plains without mountains. Okay. So now we're switching gears a little, and I want to show you what Ellen White's personal garden looked like, because you probably never seen Ellen White's personal garden, and we're going to take a look at it right now. And this is their personal garden. some raspberries, more than an acre of potatoes, several acres of corn, 50 hard maples, many peach trees, pear trees, and long rows of pie plant. I have been gathering up shrubs and flowers until we have quite a garden. I love how she says that. She describes this massive garden, or what today we would think of as a massive garden, and says, you know, we have quite a garden. And this is what her and James were doing with their personal garden. So let's see what this actually comes out to. An acre of strawberries, over an acre of potatoes, 3 acres of corn, half an acre of maple trees, and half an acre of other things. So 6+ acres of garden. That is what their personal garden was. And she didn't make it sound like this was overextensive. We have quite a garden with all of this. And we need to think in different levels. We're so used to doing no gardening that when we talk about any gardening, it seems massive. And I think part of the problem is we have lost a lot of the skills in order to actually garden in that scale. We don't have the knowledge, we don't have the tools, we don't have the understanding of what this actually looks like. And that's something that we've been working on here for years. And that's been part of my study for close to two decades, is what this is going to look like. How can we actually grow enough to be sustainable? And is it possible? And I would say 100% yes, it is possible. There's certain things that need to be put in place. And then once they're in place, and once you have the understanding and you look at things differently, it causes you to shift when you're thinking of 6 square feet, or you're thinking of 60 square feet, or you're thinking of 6 acres. Very, very different methods. So you have to be thinking differently in order to accomplish this. But it is doable.